So what do I take to help reverse my age? So for a while, I've been looking into longevity and trying to pick a range of supplements that I think have got a good chance of helping me live a longer and healthier life. However, this week I have an expert who's going to judge my stack of supplements. Dr. Nicola Conlon is going to judge my stack and tell me what I'm doing right and what I'm doing wrong. In no particular order, this is the first one that I started taking many, many years ago, creatine.
Yes, so creatine is something that has been took by many people for a long time, in particular those that are training in the gym, doing bodybuilding, things like that for muscle growth, etc. But actually there's a lot more evidence now that it can be beneficial for longevity. So I would say this is definitely a good one to be taken. It's something that I definitely take, and I would probably give this about a 9 or a 10.
Oh, 9 out of 10. Good. Okay, I'm off to a good start. Number 2, omega-3 oils.
This is also a high scoring one. I'm definitely going to give this a 10 because this is something that I take as well. And the reason being is that the omegas are very good in terms of helping with inflammation. So you've got omega-3 and omega-6. And what you don't want is getting an imbalance between your omega-6 and having too much omega-6 compared to omega-3. Now, this is something where if you are eating a really good diet that contains a lot of fish oils, that generally you shouldn't be deficient in omega-3. But many people are deficient in it. I know certainly even myself, when I've done my own blood tests looking at levels of omega-3, they're lower than they should be. So this is definitely something you would want to be trying to boost with a supplement in addition to your diet. It can help lower levels of inflammation in the body, which we know is a hallmark of aging. And also it can help to decrease the levels of triglycerides, which are obviously associated with cardiovascular disease, the incidence of which increases as you get older, and also boost levels of your HDL, so the good fat that you have in your body.
Also works a little bit like an antidepressant, apparently. Has similar effects to an SSRI. I don't know if that's because it's decreasing inflammation, because I know that makes you feel a bit rotten, or whether it's something to do with what's happening in your brain. But anyway, I find that super interesting and a really nice, safe thing. This kind of thing, it's basically food, but healthy food condensed down. I really like that kind of thing.
The only thing I would say in terms of looking at a brand is to check the back and check. In this case, it does mention the EPA and the DHA content in there, because they are the important fatty acids that you're actually looking for when you're looking at omega-3s.
Yeah, I did find some evidence, or some people talking about how there is no evidence that fish oil helps. But what they didn't count is omega-3. So the omega, the DHA, and the does work, but fish oils on their own don't always have the right concentration, so you don't get any benefit.
Exactly that. So if you were just, say, taking old school cod liver oil, then it wouldn't get a high score as it does the fact that you've sourced an omega-3 that has a high EPA and DHA.
Okay, next one. Vitamin D and K2 in one supplement.
Oh, that's good. So vitamin D is a high scoring one. Many people are deficient in vitamin D, especially if you live in the UK, like us, where we don't get the exposure to the sunlight that we should be getting. If you was just vitamin D on its own, I'd be giving you an 8 out of 10. But the fact that you have combined it with K2, I will give you a 10 out of 10. And that is because these supplements should always be paired together. Because what vitamin D can do is it can mobilize calcium stores and calcium in your blood. And if you're taking high doses of vitamin D, you do not want to be mobilizing calcium, then it getting deposited in, like your arteries and places where you definitely don't want it to get put. You want it to go in your bones and places like that. K2 basically tells the vitamin D where to put the calcium. So this is why it's really important that you should actually pair them together.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and it's a relatively new thing, and I don't think a lot of formulations include it.
No, not a lot of formulations where you get them together. Sometimes you have to buy them individually and put them together, which many people don't realize, especially after COVID. There's been a lot more people taking huge high doses of vitamin D for immune health, and it can be a bit dangerous if you're not pairing it with vitamin K2. The other thing to mention with vitamin D is timing of taking it. Ideally, you want to be taking this one in the morning. High vitamin D later in the day can actually interfere with sleep. This is, again, it's linked to our circadian rhythm, which is our 24-hour sleep-wake cycle that is regulating a lot of different factors in our body, including melatonin for sleep. Now, if you are taking vitamin D at night, this is not normally when vitamin D would be naturally produced in your body, because vitamin D is produced naturally in response to sunlight in our skin. So you're kind of like taking it at a time that doesn't make physiological sense. So vitamin D is something you would probably want to be taking in the morning.
So I've certainly experienced that, at least unless it was bad luck. I felt like, in fact, the day that I really noticed it is when I'd forgotten the day before and I thought I'd double dose, and it was also late, and that just ruined my night's sleep.
Yeah.
And then I looked it up the next day and found it apparently some reduction in melatonin when you've taken high dose. And it makes perfect sense, because normally that would be associated with the daylight, not with going
exactly
to bed.
That. And also vitamin D is another one that you can measure, like the omega-3 and omega-6s. It's something you can measure in a blood test and actually look at your levels to be able to adjust your dose accordingly.
So this one isn't mine, but it's on the table. So this is from our producer Layla. This is S. boulardii, some friendly bacteria.
Okay, so this is... I don't know exactly what the strain is, so I'm not an expert in all the different strains of bacteria, but certainly incorporating new strains into your gut microbiome is a good thing to do. We know that microbiome diversity in the gut is associated with better longevity, is associated with less inflammation across the body. So trying to increase gut diversity by taking pre and probiotics is definitely something that is beneficial. I don't really know what score to give it, because I don't know and I'm not familiar with exact strains. So I'm going to say a 7, because it is good for your microbiome, but maybe not just one strain. Maybe you want to be introducing multiple different types of strains.
I did hear, I think it's Professor Tim Spector, the Zoe guy, saying that he thinks that the fiber thing is more important than prebiotics, because essentially they're not going to live anyway unless you're taking the fiber. And there's a bit more evidence on fiber than there is on prebiotics.
And also I think a lot when it comes to gut health is diet. So yes, you can take supplements that are going to try and promote gut health in terms of introducing different species of bacteria in there, but they've got to be able to live in that environment. So having the right environment for them to live in with the fiber and things like that is very important.
Great. Okay. Okay, so next one is N-acetylcysteine, which I normally take with glycine, but I have run out of glycine. So it's N-acetylcysteine and glycine, or act together.
Okay, so this is a good one. So I'd say this is a 9, not a 10, because there's human studies to show that it does help with longevity, but there still needs to be a bit more evidence, a few more human studies. It is something that I would take myself. So N-acetylcysteine is the precursor to glutathione, and glutathione is the master antioxidant in the body, and it basically switches on a lot of pathways that are making sure that our body is able to deal with excess stress, free radicals, things like that. The reason that I'm assuming you probably take it with glycine as well, is that glycine is also used in part of the cycle that is producing glutathione, but also that there was a study, or the one human study, that demonstrated its link with longevity, used a combination of glycine and N-acetylcysteine linked as a pair together. So a good one in terms of helping with those antioxidant systems, the glutathione system, and also that there is that human clinical study that does show benefit.
Mm-hmm. The only thing I've learned recently is that I think most of the improvement happens when you're just a little bit older than me. So I don't think your glutathione levels drop off rapidly. Like, it's probably not much point taking it if you're 20. But the older you get, the more likely there's a chance. And I don't know. I'm at the cusp of it, around 45.
The other thing about taking N-acetylcysteine rather than taking glutathione itself, which some people do, is that glutathione is very poorly absorbed. So it's got no bioavailability when you take it orally. So taking the precursor, which is, the N-acetylcysteine and the glycine, which are the building blocks to make glutathione in the body, is a much better approach when it comes to trying to restore glutathione.
I also like the idea that it would be more tailored to what you actually need, because your body would respond according to if you just give glutathione, the levels might be too high almost, whereas if you're saying if you need it, make it, here's the raw materials, and then that may have some benefits.
Exactly that, yeah.
Okay, next, trimethylglycine.
TMG. So
yeah.
trimethylglycine is basically a glycine molecule with 3 methyl groups attached. Now, I'm going to score this more like a 5. And the reason for that is, do you know that you definitely need to be taking this? Why do you take it?
So I took it because taking NAD supplements and just hearing that if you take NAD supplements, you probably should provide some additional methyl groups as well. When I did my genetic age, one of them, which I'll share with you at some point, was particularly high. And that's as far as my thinking went. So it's not particularly like a fundamental reason. So I'm excited to hear why you're going to say, do I definitely need it? But it was based on the fact that I was already doing one thing, and I thought, I don't want to be doing, one of the common mistakes is you're off on a path and then you learn something new and you realize you'd been making a mistake. So I thought, do the extra thing and then I won't make a mistake. But maybe I've made a mistake. Tell me about it.
Not necessarily. It may be something that you don't need. So if you don't have any issues with methylation, then there's not really a huge reason to be taking it. The main reason why people are taking trimethylglycine is either they've done some sort of genetic tests which has shown that their body, is predisposed to having less methyl groups, and methyl groups we know are important for epigenetics, or 2, that they're taking another supplement and they've heard that because they're taking this supplement, they probably should take this one as well to deal with some of the negative consequences of another supplement they're taking, which for me immediately rings alarm bells, because it's like, why would you want to take a supplement that is making something else worse? The ones you're obviously talking about are NAD precursors. There's been studies to show that if you are taking an NAD precursor, that it can actually lead to methyl donor depletion, which is why a lot of people pair TMG or trimethylglycine with things like NMN or NR, and that's because basically as you are loading the cell with this precursor and it's making more NAD, if the NAD is being used and broken down, it gets broken down into a precursor called nicotinamide. Now in young cells, this nicotinamide would usually be recycled straight back into NAD again. But in older cells, we know that this recycling pathway becomes dysfunctional. And what that means is that nicotinamide builds up in the cell, and cells don't like it when things build up. So they have to try and get rid of it. And the way that cells get rid of nicotinamide from the cell is to stick a methyl group on and then excrete it. So the idea behind making sure that you take something like TMG alongside an NAD supplement like an NMN precursor is that you are making sure that you're not depleting your methyl groups by unnecessarily having to try and deal with this large amount of nicotinamide that may build up. So I wouldn't take TMG if you don't know that you've got a methylation problem, and just because it's not that necessary. And I don't think you should be taking supplements that require you to take another supplement to deal with a negative effect. So
this came from, well, I think it's David Sinclair saying he takes TMG alongside his NMN.
Yeah.
When I first started, I started with NMN, and that just it made sense to me that I should copy him essentially.
It does make sense. It makes sense theoretically, but then it also brings into question that are you doing more harm than good by taking the NMN? Okay,
and then so this is interesting because obviously there are other supplements that you can take. Like if you take nicotinamide as a raw material, is that bypass any of this, or do the same principles apply? It doesn't matter which precursors you take, you could be overdoing it.
Exactly that. Okay. Yeah. Because by taking a precursor, you are ignoring the reason why NAD's gone down, and you are just loading the cell with more of the raw material and hoping that it converts it into NAD. So again, think of the cell as a factory. If you went into a factory and you saw that NAD production in this factory had gone down because the machines were broken, the pipes were leaking, you wouldn't say, oh, let's just order more raw material and hope we get more NAD out the other end, and ignore all this chaos in the middle. You'd say, actually, we need to fix the factory.
So this is another one of Layla's. Turmeric.
Oh, turmeric. So turmeric is a good one, but I am going to actually rate this pretty low, and that is because it is not very bioavailable. So it's good in that we know that turmeric itself contains some compounds that are really powerful, but actually you would have to take a lot of turmeric to get the amount of active ingredient at a level of absorption to get the benefit. So the active ingredient that is in turmeric is actually something called curcumin. And it's the curcumin that seems to be having the powerful biological effect in the body. But you'd have to take so much of this supplement here to get an amount of curcumin that's actually going to have an anti-inflammatory effect, which is what curcumin does, that I'd probably say this is, you're looking more like a 2. Unfortunately for this one.
So there's a little bit of black pepper
right.
in it. Does that help?
Black pepper helps. So black pepper is known to help with the absorption of curcumin, but you would be much better off using a pure curcumin, so it's already at the higher level, and then combining that with some black pepper. There are also several different curcumin products out there now which have gone even further and looked at extracting specific parts of the curcuminoids that are actually the really potent parts, and trying to make them more bioavailable in different formulations, and things that may be liposomal to help with absorption. So there are a lot better ways to actually get curcumin now rather than just taking the actual whole turmeric itself.
So the problem here is there just isn't enough curcumin, even if you could absorb it, because it's diluted with the rest of turmeric.
Well, and it's not to say that turmeric itself doesn't have other molecules in that are really helpful and beneficial. It does, but really the real reason why people are taking turmeric is for the curcumin. So if you're going to go as far as taking a supplement, you really would be better off taking one that's actually pure curcumin. If you want the turmeric, just put some turmeric in your food, eat the turmeric, and take it that way.
Cool. That was useful. Thank you. Right. Here's another one we would have heard of. This is NMN.
This gets a low score from me, unfortunately. This is something that is a precursor. It is used to boost levels of NAD. As we know, I've studied NAD a lot. And unfortunately, I think all the latest science now shows that although NMN does go to some extent to boost NAD levels, actually it's really not the most efficient way to boost NAD. And this is because it completely ignores the reasons why NAD declines. So if we just go back to the factory analogy, if we have an NAD producing factory and NAD production has gone down, and that's because all the machines are broken, the pipes are leaking, you would not simply go, oh, let's just ignore this and order more raw material in and hope we get more NAD out the end, because this is exactly what NMN is. It's just a raw material that your body needs to make NAD. But what we know is that the reason why NAD declines is because it's struggling to actually recycle NAD. So if you are putting NAD into NMN into the system, some of it will get converted into NAD. That's another area that's argued because there's a lot of data that kind of argues whether NMN itself actually even gets into the cells. Is there the right transporters there? Does it get broken down into other things first? It's a little bit unknown still. But let's argue and say it does get into the cells, it gets made into NAD, and then actually once it's been used once, it gets broken down. And then if you don't have machines in there or recycling pathways in there that can actually deal with the breakdown products, then this gets used once and it gets chucked out. And this is where we start to see issues with methylation, because you are suddenly increasing NAD in the cells, but you're not activating NAD recycling, which is the main reason NAD has gone down. So you start to get a buildup of nicotinamide, and then the nicotinamide has nowhere to go. So the body goes, give me some methyl groups to stick on this nicotinamide to signal it to get excreted, and then you get methyl donor depletion. And that is why you need to take TMG, which we discussed earlier. So this is kind of like you're taking one supplement to try and fix one thing, but because you're ignoring the reason why that thing is declining in the first place, you're then causing another knock-on problem, which you're then having to take another supplement to fix. And actually, methyl donor depletion is actually quite serious, because methyl donors, the methyl groups are very important for a lot of other things like DNA repair, epigenetic regulation, and you certainly don't want to be wasting your methyl groups on dealing with stuff like this. And again, this isn't just a theory. In some of the clinical studies done with just using precursors and not addressing any of the other causes of NAD decline, what you see is that as you increase the dose of these precursors, that NAD does go up, but then it plateaus. Then it doesn't matter how much you increase the dose of the precursors, NAD just stays level. And what you do see is a huge increase, and it keeps going up, of something called methyl nicotinamide, and that is that excreted product, because your cells are frantically trying to get rid of this excess precursor from inside.
Fantastic. That's really helped me understand that better. In fact, I get a little flashback to when we went to the same university at one point, different years, but I used to drive an old Vauxhall then. It had a fuel tank that would leak. And because I didn't have any money, my first response was to buy a fire extinguisher. So I'll keep the fire. And that sounds like what we're doing with this situation, which is you're taking an additional step, but you're basically winding the system up in a bad way. So that's really helpful hearing that. It definitely helps hearing them more than one time.
Yeah, and I think, the reason so many people know about NMN and NR and other precursors is that for a long time it was thought that this was the best way to boost NAD. But the thing about science, and especially things that are quite new, the science does move quite fast. And what we've learned, especially over the last 5-6 years, is that we now do know why NAD declines, and we know that actually there are ways to fix it. So I think it's important to recognize that, the science at the time behind these was good, but now we know better.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, next one. Collagen. This is 100% pure bovine collagen peptides.
So I'd give collagen about a 6. The reason for this is because, well, first of all, how much do you take? Do you know?
So honestly, I took it once and I was sick the same night, and I don't even know if it was the collagen, but I haven't taken it since, and I'm taking glycine anyway. So I don't know. I haven't actually got back into taking it. So I'm not 100% confident in it either, but I thought it was worth discussing, given how...
Well, I think with collagen, it's all about the dose. So I was always very skeptical of collagen, in that we know that in terms of amino acid and peptide absorption in the gut, that a lot of it is just going to be broken down, and just because you're putting it in the gut, and even if it is absorbed, how do we know it's going to get to where we need it to go to? However, there was a study done that did use radio-labeled amino acids and certainly collagen peptides, that demonstrated that you could track and trace where these peptides were going, and that some of them did get incorporated into I think it was the some of the tissues and did actually get to some beneficial places in the body. So that kind of changed my opinion about it. But I think the main thing with collagen is you've got to take it at a really high dose. I think below a gram, it doesn't really do much. And certainly it's a bit of blind faith again, that you are taking something to try and fix something. Let's just say in aesthetics, we're taking collagen to try and improve the collagen content in our skin. But there's a big black box in the middle between you taking it and it actually getting in your skin, in that, is it actually getting to where you need it to be? And actually, would it be a better strategy just trying to improve your cellular health so that the cells actually continue producing collagen, rather than ignoring the reasons why collagen's declining in your skin, and just taking more and hoping it gets to your skin? Maybe it would be a better strategy to actually, implement things that are going to stimulate your skin cells to actually produce their own collagen.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that principle. The thing that kind of pushed me over the edge was this idea that although glycine, well, as I say, it's one reason why I don't mind not taking it, is because I'm already taking glycine. But the glycine isn't, although it's not an essential amino acid, we're not very good at producing very much of it, and we might be a little bit deficient, even though you can make your own, because essentially the evolutionary drive was great for small animals, and as we got beyond about 30 kilos, we basically don't make quite enough. So collagen turnover, especially as that slows down, gets worse, and so there may be a reason to take a supplement that helps your body do that. But that only depends on whether the cells are actually responding and making more of it.
Exactly. So it's again the factory analogy. You can supply those factories with as much raw material as you want, but if the cells aren't in good health, then they're never going to turn it into what you want it to become. Mm-hmm.
Great. 5 out of 10. Thanks, collagen. That is not going to go down well, but it's fine.
But then you'll get lots of comments.
We're not afraid. Okay, the next one. This one, someone brought in yesterday. I've never heard of it before. I thought I'd ask you about it. This is nitric oxide releasing lozenges. What do you think about that one?
So, not something that I've taken before. I know that taking things that boost levels of nitric oxide is quite popular in athletes. And the reason for this is that nitric oxide is naturally found in our bodies as a vasodilator. So it dilates blood vessels to increase blood flow. Difficult one to score because I don't know that much about this particular supplement, but in terms of vasodilation, if that is the goal that you're trying to improve, then nitric oxide is definitely a vasodilator.
Mm-hmm. From what I know about nitric oxide, it's got an incredibly short half-life. So even if it worked for 30 seconds, I don't know what it would do the rest of the day.
Well, things like nitric oxide and superoxides and hydrogen peroxides and those types of things all have very short half-lives, but in the body, it only needs to have a very short half-life to initiate some sort of reaction. And again, we do know that nitric oxide is a potent vasodilator. I guess it would just be, how much evidence there is that this does actually increase nitric oxide in the body, which I don't know.
The other factor is this is not cheap. This is about £80 for a bottle.
Okay.
So given that, how much confidence, what would you score it, your confidence to recommend?
If it does what it says it does, I think then, go ahead. You'd give it a decent score, because if vasodilation is the way forward and this is generally increasing nitric oxide, then theoretically it should work. Without looking at it more, very, very difficult. I'm going to
say you're giving 5 vibes to me.
Well, maybe. But I think in general terms, something that is really important when looking at picking supplements is looking at, have there been any trials on this particular product? Because what many people don't realize is that a lot of products make a lot of claims, but actually don't have any clinical studies to support the claims. And when looking for a product, you want to be looking for a product that actually has done a clinical trial actually on the very specific formulation that is in that product. So, for example, I'm not, saying this is true, but this product is saying it increases nitric oxide, and nitric oxide has got all these benefits. So it may be sort of promoting this product as if you increase nitric oxide, you'll do vasodilation and X, Y, and Z. But just because nitric oxide is known to do that, and there are papers published showing that it does that, is very different to knowing that when you take that product orally, that it is going to have the effect that nitric oxide naturally has in the body. Mm-hmm. So what you'd really want to be seeing is a study that's done on that exact product, not part of the formulation or one ingredient, the whole product, showing that it actually does increase nitric oxide and that it does have those effects.
Yeah. I think it's a really good point, because a lot of supplements, when you pay attention, you figure out that's what's going on, which is they've got the story, they sell you the story, but not the compound that actually fulfills the story. It's just same ingredients, so maybe it does the same thing as the study that was totally different.
Exactly that. And there's a huge difference in a study that's done on cells in a petri dish and a compound that's shown to work versus giving a human an oral supplement of the same compound that has to go all the way through the gut. It has to go through liver metabolism. It has to get through the blood. It has to actually get into the cells where it's said to have its effect. So it's very important to look at the studies. Most people don't realize that it's not a legal requirement to do any studies. So that is something to look out for.
Okay, great. Okay. So next one, this I do not actually take anymore, but here it is. It's a whole bunch of stuff all into one supplement. So it's essentially a multivitamin. I don't know how you could score this, because you'd have to look at every ingredient and all. But I don't know what you think about the concept of this sort of multivitamin with prebiotics.
Yeah, I don't personally take Athletic Greens just because I think it's very expensive. And I think if you've got a good diet, then you really, you can get a lot of the sort of different ingredients and beneficial botanicals out of your diet. For somebody that maybe doesn't have a great diet and is not planning to improve their diet, then this may be a good solution as a kind of quick win to try and just get some of those compounds and those beneficial vitamins, minerals, etc. into their bodies. But for me, I think it's all about convenience. I think trying to get a lot of molecules more from their natural forms is always going to be the best bet in terms of absorption and bioavailability. But I think it is a good solution, A, if you've got the money, and B, if you really don't have time to focus on having a healthy diet.
Yeah.
Why do you not take it anymore?
Oh, Nicola, you shouldn't have asked. Basically, let's just call it bowel upset.
Okay.
We've got no windows
everyone.
in this room. So yeah, it's the prebiotics I think were a problem for me. It's also really expensive.
Yeah.
And so the combination of those two things kind of put me off. I also spend a lot of time and energy thinking about diet, and it also, I think I probably don't need to take every single one of these things every single day in order to get the benefit.
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay, next one. Now, you know this one really well, but this is, I would say, from my perspective, when I first came across this supplement, what I love about it is basically the strategy behind it. So now this is your supplement, but so it's a bit unfair to get you to rate it. It's a 10 out of 10.
It's a 10 out of 10 with an asterisk next to it saying, disclaimer, I am CEO of the company.
But I would like to hear your description of the strategy element to it, because what I find kind of annoying, I think it's actually truth in general with how the universe works, is if you don't have a limit, like if you just give one answer and like play that tune at full blast, it's never going to be the full truth. And what I like about this is there is this sense of balance and actually acknowledging the system you're trying to change rather than just changing one element of it. So tell us a little bit about what's in this and how that works together as a system.
Yes, so I think what's really important, when looking at supplements is, why are you taking a supplement? And for a lot of people, and I know with some of the ones we've just discussed, people are taking it for a reason. So when we're looking at NAD boosting supplements, people are taking it to try and boost NAD. And often it's not the most obvious solutions that work the best. So in terms of NAD, we've spoke at length just before about NMN. So when people realized that boosting NAD was something that was beneficial to do for your health, basically people went, well, what's the quickest and easiest way of doing this? The first thing was that people were putting pure NAD in capsules and swallowing it and hoping for the best, basically, hoping it got into the cells. It was very soon realized that this is not a sensible thing to do because NAD is really unstable. It has no bioavailability when taken orally. So, it's just a useless strategy. So the next best thing was, okay, well, if we can't take pure NAD, why don't we take some precursor? So the raw material that the body uses to make NAD. So this is where supplements like NMN or NR started to come about. Now, what became very obvious as the science advanced was that the reason why NAD is declining is twofold. First of all, our body is using up more NAD because of inflammation and because of an increased requirement for repair, which NAD drives. And secondly, because our capacity to make and recycle NAD actually declines as we get older. So within our cells, we have something called the salvage pathway, which basically makes and recycles NAD. But this declines as we get older. So by taking a single precursor supplement like NMN to restore NAD, what you're effectively doing is giving a raw material to a cellular factory that doesn't have any functioning machines left in it. And we know from all the studies now that if you are trying to boost NAD with just a precursor and you're ignoring the fact that recycling has reduced, NAD recycling, you're ignoring the fact that excess inflammation is eating up all of your NAD and that there is increased damage, which is basically using a lot of NAD as well. Then you start to get other issues whereby you start to cause methylation issues because the precursors that you're taking, they might generate a little bit of NAD, but they're actually getting broken down back into precursors, which our body can't recycle again, so they're building up. Our body deals with this by overexpressing other methylating enzymes, which then use all our methyl groups trying to tag and excrete this excess precursor from the cell. So when I came into this field and looking at all of the science surrounding NAD, it stood out to me very quickly that a lot of the strategies and supplements people were taking to boost NAD scientifically didn't make any sense, because we now know what the root causes of NAD decline are. Therefore, it makes a lot more sense to actually fix the root causes of NAD decline. So this is exactly what we designed this NAD boosting supplement to do. We call it a second generation NAD booster because it goes beyond just using a precursor, but actually has multiple different ingredients in there that are all acting to actually repair all the different parts of that NAD factory that are broken and try and actually fix the reasons why NAD's declined. Because at the end of the day, our bodies were very, very good at making NAD when we were young. It's just become dysfunctional. So really, rather than ignoring the problems and, what we actually want to do is just take ourselves back to how they were performing when we were young. So we do have a precursor in there. We use nicotinamide. We don't use NMN. We don't use NR. The reason for this is that despite what many people think, nicotinamide is actually the body's preferred precursor to make NAD. It's what it naturally uses. Our body does not naturally use NR or NMN. It's nicotinamide where it makes the majority of its NAD from via the salvage pathway. And also nicotinamide is freely diffusible across cell membranes. That means that it can enter every single cell, whereas NR and NMN are restricted to entering cells that have the correct channel to let them in, so they can't get into every cell in the body. The other thing that we focus on is actually just fixing those root causes of NAD decline. So we've got ingredients in there which are actually switching back on the salvage pathway, so that actually activate a particular enzyme called NAMPT, which is the enzyme that drives all of that youthful NAD recycling that we have when we're younger, but decreases as we get older, which leads to NAD decline. So effectively, it actually switches back on youthful NAD production. The other thing is looking at the reasons that, are draining NAD. So we know that inflammation is a huge drain on our NAD supplies because of a protein called CD38, which is an inflammatory protein that gets expressed as we get older. And this uses huge amounts of NAD to drive inflammation, and chronic inflammation is terrible when it comes to aging. And if you are trying to boost NAD with something like a precursor or an IV NAD or something like that, then you are essentially giving CD38 its fuel to drive further inflammation. So a real key thing that you need to be doing is inhibiting this inflammatory protein. So we have ingredients in there that are actually inhibiting CD38 to make sure that any NAD that you are boosting is not going to drive an inflammation and being wasted. It's actually going towards the beneficial repair processes that we have. Another key thing is looking at methylation issues surrounding NAD supplements. So as we've just discussed earlier, lots of people say, if you boost NAD, you need to take a methyl donor like trimethylglycine because it depletes your NAD levels. It will only deplete your NAD levels if you are not getting the recycling pathway happening. If that youthful recycling process is happening, all of those precursors will be getting recycled, so they won't be building up in the cell and they won't need to be methylated and excreted. And we also include an ingredient in there which inhibits a particular methylation enzyme to promote recycling rather than its excretion from the cell. So we sort of focus on having a whole system approach. So it's not just ignoring the reasons why NAD is going down, but it's actually looking at all the science that we know shows why NAD is declining and actually addressing these problems rather than ignoring them.
Mm-hmm. And I know you've gone to great lengths to make sure it's the appropriate dosages and that they're easily absorbable as well.
Yeah, exactly that. So, a key example is one of the ingredients that we use in there, an active ingredient that we know in cell studies will actually increase levels of the NAMPT enzyme in the salvage pathway is an ingredient called quercetin. Now, if you put quercetin on cells in a petri dish, it will do that. If you take quercetin orally, it doesn't work so well because quercetin is not something that's sort of like naturally available in its pure form. Actually, in nature, quercetin exists as a glycoside, so something called rutin, which is a quercetin glycoside. And what we do is rather than put pure quercetin in the product, we use rutin. And that means that this quercetin goes through the gut with its glycoside, which is like a little sugar molecule attached. It gets absorbed in this format, and then once it's in the body, the sugar is then cleaved, and then the actual quercetin molecule can enter the cells and do its job. And this is a key example of where people can be so misled to think that if you found a molecule that works in cells, this pure active ingredient, that you can just take that active ingredient and it's going to work the same way in your body as it does in a petri dish, then you're very mistaken. Quite often, a lot of the molecules, especially that are derived from plants in the first place, work much better when they are actually given to the body in the plant form, and then the body can absorb those molecules from it.
Fantastic. So I also discovered recently that the NMN I was buying, which I think when I bought it was more expensive, gets turned into nicotinamide in your gut anyway.
Yes.
That was like, sad.
Yeah, and also there's a lot of evidence the other precursor NR also gets converted into nicotinamide. So again, it's like, just take nicotinamide, but don't only take nicotinamide, but with all the other ingredients to fix all the other problems alongside it.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. It's really interesting. I've never come across anything quite like it that has these multiple different angles. And I know you're also working on some other stuff that will be similar in the future. Not the same problem, but...
Yeah, and I think this goes with a lot of biology, and this is a lot to do with the training that I had in drug development, in that I was fortunate to work for a very forward-thinking company who did drug development a different way, because unfortunately a very narrow-minded way of thinking within the industry is that if you have an issue in the body, there's this single problem causing it, and there's going to be this single molecule that's going to fix it, when the reality is that a problem in the body is usually caused by multiple different things, and actually one molecule or one drug or one supplement, one nutrient, whatever that is not going to be enough to fix that thing. The other obvious thing is that a single molecule doesn't stick to a single thing in the body, and this is why lots of drugs have side effects, because they're designed to target a specific pathway or a specific protein, but the reality is they're actually doing a lot of other things. So when you design something that actually accounts for the fact that you need to be doing multiple things, but then pick molecules that actually already have what we call that footprint, so they're already acting on multiple pathways, you get a much more targeted and efficacious effect.
Really interesting. Thank you. I hope you learned a lot from that. If you want to try Nuchido yourself, you can get a discount if you use the code in the description down below.